Here's what's coming up this hour. The Ukrainian city of Mariupol set to be under heavy attack. Reports say bombs are falling on homes, and even a humanitarian convoy headed to the city had to turn back.
The meeting between the foreign secretaries of Russia and Ukraine ends. Both sides give their version of how things turned out and the war in Ukraine.
Plus, the U.S. House of Representatives votes to ban U.S. imports of Russian oil and a rush of $13.6 billion in aid to Ukraine. Well, welcome to the program this hour. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Let's bring you up to speed what's been happening the last couple of hours. A meeting between Russia and Ukraine's foreign ministers has ended. Not much was achieved, but both agreed to work on humanitarian issues. 7 humanitarian corridors to help civilians leave cities besieged by Russian forces, including Mariupol, are being opened.
And speaking of Mariupol, the key port city is said to be experiencing the worst humanitarian conditions. Residents have reportedly been trapped for days in freezing temperatures without electricity or water.
And the UK has announced new visa rules for Ukrainian passport holders. They will be able to apply online. Now, another video broadcast by the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been posted online. This time he calls on Ukraine's partners from around the world to deliver solutions to the crisis in his country, based on reality, not on abstract opinions.
According to him, leaders are getting together to discuss the war, and Ukraine's membership of NATO makes the point that he knows which of those leaders are supporting Ukraine.
His message does come on the heels of talks held today between Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his Ukrainian counterparts Dmitry Kuleba in Antalya, Turkey.
Well, let's begin with attacks in Mariupol, with what we're learning. Joining us, VOA's Anna Chernikova is in western Ukraine. Anna, welcome to the program. Not Anna, Jerry, rather. Hi, Jerry. This is, of course, Jerry Kerry joining us from Kherson. Jerry, how are you doing?
Should I say fine, or I'm trying to be fine? We are just coping to see that we live every day to find alternative means to escape these invasions. And every day by day is becoming more scary, and the explosion and the vibration is terrible now. And before it was better, but now it's getting out of hand. And this is the right time for the Nigerian government need to act, because I don't want it to be a situation like the Sumi resident that was stuck. This is how it started, before the whole building was brought down. So this is the right time for the government to liaise with these people and help evacuate us out from this city. It's very, very terrible now. You can't sleep, and the bombing is like constant, and you feel the vibrations. And this day, we don't know what happened, if it will collapse or what next. So we just wish the Nigerian government take action now. This is the right time for them to act.
All right, Jerry, hold the thought. Just a little bit about what's been happening so far. The invasion has caused a mass exodus of civilians, including thousands of international students from Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Ukraine was home to over 76,000 foreign students, according to government data from 2020. Nearly a quarter of the students were from Africa, with the largest numbers coming from Nigeria, Morocco, and Egypt. Now, hundreds of Nigerians have now been evacuated out of the country. Many, and this is like Jerry, who's joined us, are still waiting for help. He is in the city of Kherson, which is strategically located in southern Ukraine. The city was first significant urban center to fall since Russia invaded Ukraine February 24. Jerry, I mean, as one of the Nigerian students, I know that the last time we spoke to you, and we also spoke to other students in Sumi, and you've heard about about them, how they've left. I know that you're hoping there will be a humanitarian corridor in Kherson as quickly as possible, but while you've been there, the communication from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, what would you say? What have they said, and what are you hearing with regards to how you can leave Kherson?
Okay, now at this point, we are taking our safety to our ends. So because now nothing from our Nigerian government, we've not heard anything from them. So we have to speak to the major in Kherson, and he said that since we are aware that the city has been captured, that the place is very, very dangerous unless the government official will help us evacuate, that we cannot do that on our own. So there's some implementations he's trying to put in place, but I'm not sure that will come soon. And these people are not willing to cease fire because the mayor himself is not in Kherson because Kherson has been taken over. He's talking to us from another city. So now they are looking for a way to come into the city, but they cannot come in peace. They need to come in violence because Russians are already here. So, but other nationalities like Nigerians, we can come here in peace, talk to these people and evacuate your own people, and then everybody will be fine. But for us to apply the road now is very dangerous for us. So staying here on the ground is not still safe for us as well.
But, Jerry, you do know that for those who have evacuated, the rule from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the advice has been to get to the border first. Is that possible for you to get to one of 4 borders of Poland or of Hungary or of Romania? Is that a possibility at all?
It is not possible, 100% not possible for us. Because we stay at the southern part, and the only border we share border with Crimea, which is a territory to Russians. So before we could cross, we need to pass through what's it called? That Mariupol, Mariupol, Nikolaev is heavily attacked now. We need to pass through those routes to get to the border. So it's not a 2 hours journey. It's not a 10 hours journey. It's just like 18 hours journey. And this road had been broken. The bridge had been broken, and the only way is to pass through where the Russian troops are. According to the previous map released yesterday, the place they are is only safe because the road are still good for us to fly. But the aspect of us going to Poland border, Romanian or Hungarian border is not possible for us unless the government will help us make that possible.
I know that when you spoke to us earlier today, Jerry, you talked about the Russians using civilians as I think you said their media power. What exactly did you mean?
Okay, what I mean by that is this. The Ukrainian opened hands for foreigners to come in and help them fight this war. So before we were safe, we were like able to come out and be open. But now, since the civilians have been attacking Russians, so the safety of the foreigners it's 0% now.
So they might mistake you for mercenaries.
Yes, you get that right. So they attack you from distance because they don't know who are you, they don't know who you are, they don't know what you're about to do. So for them to safeguard their territory, once they see approaching vehicles or foreigners, they have to take action. So it's not safe for us because they don't know who is fighting for the Ukrainians and who is not fighting for the Ukrainians.
Jerry, how are you doing with supplies? I know that you've been there many days, and I can understand, the angst in your voice. You're anxious, you're afraid. You and the other Nigerians were there with you, and we do understand, what you're going through. But how have you been doing with supplies, with food, with water, with electricity, and so on?
Okay, for that, it's better. It was better than some days ago. It was better where we still have supplies. But since the Russian invasion, they are trying to fake it to the world that they are helping the civilians by bringing their own foodstuff. And the people of Kherson don't want to accept that. Since that was rejected and their media was not allowed to film the event, so they said, okay, the only solution is for them to block all supplies, medicals as well, to come into the city. Now, for us to have supply now is it's not possible, because the little one we have is the one we got before last week. But since their mission was not successful, they have to block the border from allowing the supplies to come in. Now for the electricity, electricity is somehow good, but the internet, once they blow it off, they go fix it, because we need to talk to our loved ones. And so many cities, so many of my colleagues now, I can't reach them. So because I just like for the other medias I've been talking to help them, when they get to me, they talk about my colleagues. I said I can't even get some of them online because their internet is not working and their supply are running out. We have been assisted by Maritime Union, but now they can't do anything. If this one finish, we are left with nothing. So the best option is for us to leave this place.
Pretty dire situation you're in, Jerry. We're hoping that authorities are listening and somehow you get the help that you need, especially to get out of Kherson. Thank you for speaking with us, and as much as possible, do stay safe.
Thank you very much.
So we told you earlier about the broadcast of the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky posted online his means of communicating with Ukrainians and the rest of the world. He calls on Ukraine's partners from around the world to deliver solutions to the crisis in his country based on reality and not on abstract opinions.
He says leaders are getting together to discuss the war and Ukraine's membership of NATO, making the point that he knows which of those leaders are supporting Ukraine. Well, let's take a look at day 15 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
President Volodymyr Zelensky's video messages are becoming a staple in Ukraine, providing a beacon of hope for his countrymen and a symbol of courage to the outside world. Today he spoke of Ukrainian men and women defending their state and repelling attacks in key areas, confirming that 3 people, including 1 child, were killed in a Mariupol maternity hospital bombing, and debunking Russia's claims that there were no patients in the hospital at the time of the attack. He says the Russians have created a humanitarian catastrophe, adding, "My heart is broken by what the occupiers have done to our cities, to our state." Ukraine's armed forces today released a video it said showed a damaged residential area in Mariupol following a Russian artillery attack. The video posted on Facebook showed a burning building as people walked by in a street lined with debris. A written post alongside the footage read, "The occupants just shelled the residential area with artillery round. The rocket hit the house. Where do you see here any military or strategic objects?" Aid agencies say humanitarian aid is most urgently needed in Mariupol, where 400,000 people have been trapped for more than a week with no food, water, nor power. The city council said the port had come under fresh airstrikes this morning, a day after Moscow bombed what Ukraine called a functioning maternity hospital there. Ukraine's presidential advisor, Oleksiy Arestovich, says Russia has switched tactics to targeting civilians. Hours earlier, Ukraine's foreign minister and that of Russia met in Turkey for their first high-level talks since the invasion began. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said both his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov and Ukraine's Dmytro Kuleba had requested that he attend the talks, adding that he wished the meeting could be a turning point. Meeting over, the Turkish foreign minister said it was civil despite all the difficulties, and the most important outcome of the talks was establishing contact. But his Ukrainian counterpart said it appeared Russia would continue its offensive on Ukraine and seeks a surrender from Kyiv that it will not get. During a press conference, he said his impression from the meeting was that Russia is not in a position at this point to establish a ceasefire after invading Ukraine.
We have the VOA's Anna Chernikova on the ground in Western Ukraine. Anna joins us now. Anna, thanks for joining us on the program, and really thank you for all the reporting you've done with us throughout this time. But let's begin with the attacks on Mariupol. We're only privy to the short video on social media about, the buildings, with the smoldering buildings that we're seeing. What are you hearing as regards the Russian attacks on the city?
So far it's just a terrible thing, and Ukrainian nation never could have imagined that this could happen. Yesterday it was a very heavy shelling on the maternity hospital and children's hospital. During this week that the city is surrounded every day, every night, 24/7, the city is under the shelling, under the artillery attacks, civil areas in particular. According to the latest information, more than 1,200 people, civil people, have already died in Mariupol during this week. The situation is, humanitarian situation is catastrophic. They really needed an immediate humanitarian corridor 3 days ago. So now it's just people already started to die because of lack of water and food, lack of medication. I cannot even imagine what is going to happen in the next few days if any humanitarian aid would be able to get in. So we just hope that somehow Russian side will let humanitarian help in, because all these days that we have the negotiations regarding the corridor, the shellings are continuing and there is no break. So today, for example, it was a plan to start evacuation at 9 a.m., but the main road for evacuation was under the shelling since the very early in the morning. So nothing was happening today. So yeah, we'll see.
That's a long sigh, Anna. And, that's also something we heard from the WHO, about 18 attacks on facilities, health facilities there. But we also learned this morning that Ukraine has opened up 7 humanitarian corridors for citizens to leave. Do we know how they're holding up?
Yeah, it was quite successful for Sumy region. More than 43,000 people have been evacuated from that area, which is really great for people, because it was quite difficult situation there as well. Kyiv region is partly successful, so a lot of people from Kyiv region, I mean Bucha, and that Kyiv region, little towns, also have been evacuated in the past couple of days under the shelling, because shelling is not completely over, but still people are able to get out. The same also happened today in Kharkiv region, so not the city of Kharkiv, but the city of Izum, which is next to Kharkiv, also was evacuated today. So it is partly successful, but again, Mariupol, Kherson, no success yet.
And Anna, where does that leave the ceasefire that was agreed with Russia yesterday, which was supposed to end at 9 p.m. local time?
It didn't happen.
At all? So you mean...
Well, it was...
Sorry, Anna. Are you saying that people are leaving without humanitarian corridors and the protection of military forces guiding them, as they navigate out of these volatile areas?
Look, so people, the situation is the following, that in some areas, shelling didn't happen. But for example, if we take Sumy region, it was no shelling for the past days. So the active areas where shellings were happening for the past days, they never stopped. Yeah, this is true that Ukrainian armed forces are guiding people through the corridors, but not always it is completely safe. So, as I would repeat myself, Kiev region evacuation happened, but it was happening under the shelling.
So, Anna, about the meeting held in Turkey, no impact, no promises made, more of the accusations. What was perhaps the most certain? What do you think Ukrainians really, do they have faith in any of the negotiations that are taking place?
Well, to be honest, in Turkey, people didn't expect anything, any decisions or any proceedings in anything. So it was not a surprise that they didn't come up with anything. The only hope for the negotiation is at least regarding the humanitarian corridor. So people really believe and people really hope for that. For ceasefire, there is no hope so far. So maybe next negotiation in Belarus would change something, but so far, no.
VOA. Thank you so much. Anna Chernikova, VOA's correspondent in Western Ukraine. Thank you and continue to stay safe.
Thank you.
The U.S. House of Representatives has passed legislation, they did on Wednesday, though, by a vote of 414 to 17 to ban U.S. imports of Russian oil and other energy in response to its attack on Ukraine. 15 Republicans and 2 Democrats opposed the measure.
Passage of the bill came one day after President Joe Biden used his executive powers to impose such a ban. The House measure put lawmakers on record as firmly supporting the U.S. trade ban. It also calls for reviewing Russia's participation in some international trade programs, such as the World Trade Organization. The U.S. House also voted to rush $13.6 billion in aid to Ukraine as it battles invading Russian forces, along with $1.5 trillion to keep U.S. government programs operating through September 30 and avoid agency shutdowns this weekend.
The House approved the wide-ranging appropriations in bipartisan votes, sending the legislation to the Senate, which aims to act by midnight of Friday. That's a deadline when existing U.S. government funds expire.
The question on the second portion of the divided House Resolution 8. The yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device.
As the member designated by Ms. Spear, I inform the House that Ms. Spear will vote yes on H.R. 6968.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. LaMalfa, California, I've informed the House that Mr. LaMalfa will vote yes on H.R. 6968.
Joining us now is Stephen Hayes, President Emeritus, Corporate Counsel on Africa, and now CEO Cohen & Woods International Incorporated in Washington. He's also an expert in Russia and Ukraine issues and was also a former lawmaker. Stephen, the pictures we just saw, pretty familiar to you, right?
Yes, they are. I have spent a lot of time in the House looking at such votes and also on committees, primarily on Africa, but I have spent a lot of time in the former Soviet Union and Russia as well.
And what do you make of America's response in terms of support for Ukraine during this invasion of the country by Russia?
That's a good question. I think that it's fairly complex. I think that nearly all Americans are behind Ukraine, but also there's the frustration of just how much we can do to support Ukraine. I think that we're probably in one of the most dangerous times of history in the last 50 years, not simply for the United States, but for the whole world. I think that most people living now have not really experienced such a crisis, and this is a crisis that that I liken to much like an iceberg. 90% of the problem is underwater. You see the battles, but what could happen beyond the battles is more than fairly. It's significant to the rest of the world.
So in terms of the support coming from the U.S., what are your thoughts on it? Should the U.S. continue to support Ukraine? Do you think that it fuels the war in any way?
Well, I think you have to support it. There's $14 billion of support. About half is for humanitarian support. The other half is for let's just say it, for weapons, for defense support. That would largely be drones, probably Stinger missiles, anti-tank missiles, and so forth. You can't simply sit by and watch a nation of 40 million or so being slaughtered. And especially under what I think is largely a senseless attack and an attack of acquisition. So I think the American people are very sympathetic. In fact, I know that. I think that even the bill, or Biden's decision to halt Russian oil in the United States, is going to cost the U.S. and tax the individual citizen some at the gas tank. But let's keep in mind that Russian oil is only 1% of all the oil we have, so that can be replaced very, very simply. It's a better measure of how much the U.S. citizens will tolerate, and there aren't many objections to the cutting of Russian oil.
And if Russian oil, as you rightly explained, is just 1% of imports to the United States, then why are U.S. oil prices going up? Because people have complained oil prices used to be about $1, $2, a few cents, and now they're up as high as $4.
I think that's a very, very good question. I think that there are always those who will exploit those crises such as this. And I think that some of it is logical in the sense that it creates anxiety. And so the prices go up. But on the other hand, I think there's some price gouging on this. And I think that's a very good question.
Russian foreign minister did say that, Russia's economy is sort of in shock, so looking like the sanctions are working. But do you think that they would eventually cripple President Putin's hold or his advancement in Ukraine?
I don't think that it will cripple his advancement as much as it's more of a long-term effect on Russia that will maybe undermine his regime, and it is a regime. It's certainly tyrannical. I think that the sanctions are ineffective. They're going to be more long term, and if anything, Putin will try harder to have Ukraine capitulate. So I think it's good. The intensity will grow as opposed to with seeing Russian withdrawal. Putin simply is not that type of mentality.
Stephen, those talks have been going on for days, the negotiations between representatives of the Ukrainian government and the Russian government. And today, foreign ministers of Russia and Ukraine held that important meeting in Turkey. What would be the middle ground, do you think, for both President Vladimir Putin and President Volodymyr Zelensky, seeing how much both are unwilling to budge or compromise to end this war?
I'm not sure that Russia particularly wants a compromise. I think the longer it goes on, the better chances they feel they have of encircling Kiev, and to them, I think that ends the war. But at least I don't think it will end the war, though, because I think it'll be ongoing for some time. The middle ground, I don't know if there is a middle ground any longer. The middle ground for both Ukraine and Russia would be to say we're not going to join NATO, but I'm not sure that that's an issue now. The Russians want to be sure that their access to the Black Sea, which is going to be the major warm water port, their only warm water port really, through the Black Sea, isn't cut off. So if Ukraine would join NATO, then they have a very serious problem. And so I think diplomacy failed. They should have been addressed. Those issues should have been addressed much earlier. Obviously, they aren't, and now that's what we're left with. Zelensky has talked about weakening his position on joining NATO, but the problem is with this invasion, it just reinforces those who feel that the Ukraine needs some protection from a body like NATO. Otherwise, they have none. So what's happened is just reinforced and hardened both positions in some ways.
Mr. Hayes, what do you make of the allegations, the biological weapon in Ukraine, which Russia is accusing the United States of?
First of all, I don't believe it. I think that we would not use biological weapons. I think that's absurd. I think it's Russian propaganda. And I think the track record for the Russian propaganda is well known. Not that I think, in fairness, all countries use propaganda. Of course they do. But the Russians have been particularly nefarious on that. And I think it's just outrageous that they would make that charge. There is no way that the U.S. would use biological weapons.
Perhaps a final question to you. The impact of this war on global politics and the economy, what do you reckon?
I think this is huge in terms of global politics and economic issues. It certainly changes the balance of power. I think one of the things that Putin has done is driven the West back together. There was a growing rift between, say, Europe, U.S., Japan. All those are in alignment, and I think those countries who are for democracy have also come back in line. Putin has brought home the reality of the world today. And in that regard, it's become more a bipolar and in some ways with China, a tripolar area. I think with China is also in a tough position right now. They are quietly supplying support to Russia. And I think there's going to be a lot of questions about China's neutrality and balance, which it's always claimed to have. I think in Africa, especially too, and particularly in a country like Angola, which is a client state of Russia, essentially, it's going to raise a lot of questions. The effect on Africa, I'm not sure on. I hope that Africa can stay the course because there's a lot of good things happening on the continent right now. And I just hope that remains. But I'm afraid that we may be falling back into a Cold War that this time may be closer to being a hot war rather than the Cold War of the past. As I said, I think we're in one of the most dangerous times of most people's lives in this country who have not experienced beyond 50 years ago.
And hopefully this war will be a resolution soon, and both countries can find that impossible middle ground in which to settle. Stephen, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for joining us this hour.
Thank you. It's an honor. Thank you very much.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, he says Russia can survive the sanctions, some of the things he mentioned in Antalya, Turkey. But government spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says the economy is experiencing a shock and that measures are being taken to soften the impact of what he describes as an absolutely unprecedented economic war being waged against Moscow. He describes the situation as turbulent, but says that measures to calm and stabilize it were already being taken.
Right, and staying with those sanctions, Britain has imposed sanctions on Chelsea Soccer Club owner Roman Abramovich and Igor Sechin, a chief executive of Russian oil giant Rosneft, hitting them with asset freezes and travel bans because of their links to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Both billionaires plus businessman Oleg Deripaska and 4 other Russian oligarchs are the most high-profile figures to be added to the British sanctions list since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and follows criticism that Britain has been acting too slowly. The actions put on ice Abramovich's plan to sell the Premier League club to the current European champions, although the government said the team could still carry on playing. And there have been loud calls for British lawmakers for actions to be taken against Abramovich and other Russian oligarchs, with criticism that Boris Johnson's government was not moving fast enough compared to the European Union and the United States.
German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier today welcomed Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at the presidential residence in Berlin. Both discussed solutions to the Ukraine crisis, underlining the importance of de-escalating the conflict, with Scholz pointing out that Germany was certainly not sending warplanes to Ukraine.
Well, the United States on Wednesday denied renewing Russian accusations that Washington was operating biowarfare labs in Ukraine, calling the claims laughable and suggesting Moscow may be laying the groundwork to use a chemical or biological weapon. And late Tuesday, Russia repeated its accusation of several years that the United States is working with Ukrainian laboratories to develop biological weapons. The Russian accusations are absurd. They are laughable. In the words of my Irish Catholic grandfather, a bunch of malarkey. There's nothing to it. It's classic Russian propaganda, says Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby.
The Russian accusations are absurd. They're laughable. And, you know, in the words of my Irish Catholic grandfather, a bunch of malarkey. There's nothing to it. It's classic Russian propaganda, and I wouldn't, if I were you, I wouldn't give it a drop of ink worth paying attention to.
Yeah, but can you explain to us has there been any relationship between the?
We are not developing biological or chemical weapons inside Ukraine. It's not happening.
And more on the humanitarian corridors. The IOM Director General Antonio Vitorino says Ukraine and Russia should guarantee secure corridors to allow refugees flee, but also for supplies to reach those who wish to remain in the country. Ukraine had hoped to start evacuating civilians through 7 humanitarian corridors today, a day after it said a children's hospital was hit in a Russian airstrike on the southern port city of Mariupol, where thousands are pinned down without access to water, medicine or food. But Ukraine's foreign minister said Moscow had refused during talks to guarantee humanitarian access to rescue civilians trapped under the bombardment. During his visits to the Mediaka border crossing, Vitorino said their key concern was to keep the flow of refugees going and to address people's basic needs. More than 2.3 million people have fled Ukraine as of today, of whom more than 112,000 are third country nationals. The Polish border guard said that 1.43 million people had entered the country from Ukraine since Russia invaded its neighbor the 24th of February.
I have to say, the humanitarian corridors need to take place in absolute safety and security, guaranteed for both parties. We are not involved, as UN, we are not involved in the negotiation of the corridors. It's a bilateral direct negotiation between Ukraine and Russia. But from the international point of view, from the international humanitarian law point of view, humanitarian corridors need to be taken with absolute security, not just evacuating people who want to leave the cities that are under attack, but also to be able to provide food, non-food items, water to those who are willing to stay in those cities. It's a two-way process, and we strongly appeal to both parties, to Ukraine and Russia, to agree that the corridors can provide the necessary support for those who are also willing to stay.
Welcome back. We have, well, this is our full coverage, a full 1-hour coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And so far, we've told you about the shellings going on in Mariupol, as well as that meeting between Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. Now, a husband and wife, Valerie and Halina, were working as engineer chemists at the Chernobyl plant during the world's worst nuclear disaster back in 1986. They were evacuated, lost their home and everything they had. And when Russian troops targeted the Chernobyl and Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plants last week, they feared they would have to live through the trauma again. Valerie, who's 61, said the nuclear units at both plants are well protected against missiles and even a plane falling directly on the reactor building. But he still warns of a huge catastrophe waiting. Valerie gave a stark prediction if any of the reactors of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is damaged.
The United States has closed the door on supplying combat aircraft to Ukraine, saying the intelligence community assessed that it would be high risk to move, a move that could increase the chances of a Russian escalation with NATO. NATO ally Poland surprised Washington Tuesday with a public offer to transfer its Russian-made MiG-29 fighter jets to a U.S. base in Germany as a way to replenish Ukraine's air force. Well, this came after Kyiv implored the West for combat aircraft. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby explains the U.S. decision, saying that the transfer of the aircraft would change little for Ukraine relative to Russian capabilities, and stressed U.S. support for supplying other types of weapons.
Now, the Secretary also had a chance to discuss with Minister Blaszczak the proposal to send MiG-29 fighter aircraft to Ukraine, and specifically the notion of doing so by way of transfer to U.S. custody. Secretary Austin thanked the minister for Poland's willingness to continue to look for ways to assist Ukraine, but he stressed that we do not support the transfer of additional fighter aircraft to the Ukrainian Air Force at this time, and therefore have no desire to see them in our custody either. We believe the best way to support Ukrainian defense is by providing them the weapons and the systems that they need most to defeat Russian aggression, in particular, anti-armor and air defense. We, along with other nations, continue to send them these weapons, and we know that they are being used with great effect. The slowed Russian advance in the north and the contested airspace over Ukraine is evidence alone of that. Although Russian air capabilities are significant, their effectiveness has been limited due to Ukrainian strategic, operational, and tactical ground-based air defense systems, surface-to-air missiles, and manpads. Secondly, the Ukrainian Air Force currently has several squadrons of fully mission-capable aircraft. We assess that adding aircraft to the Ukrainian inventory is not likely to significantly change the effectiveness of the Ukrainian Air Force relative to Russian capabilities. Therefore, we believe that the gain from transferring those MiG-29s is low. And finally, the intelligence community has assessed that the transfer of MiG-29s to Ukraine may be mistaken as escalatory and could result in a significant Russian reaction that might increase the prospects of a military escalation with NATO. Therefore, we also assess the transfer of the MiG-29s to Ukraine to be high risk.
High risk.
This must be a big blow to President Zelensky.
Well, he wanted no-fly zone. He wanted the military aircrafts. He can't have everything he wants, unfortunately, during this war. And we have been keeping tabs on Nigerians who have been making that movement out of Ukraine. One of them, Linus, joins us now. He left Sumy days ago, made it across the Hungarian border, just got to Budapest. Linus, we understand you're at the train station. Thank you for speaking with us. Is it safe now? Do you feel safe now, having left Sumy days ago?
Yes, definitely. Good evening. We feel very, very safe now. In fact, they just picked us up from the train station. We're headed to the hotel where we'll be lodged before the evacuation flight. So, yeah, we feel very safe. I'm happy. One step closer to home.
Indeed. I mean, we can see and feel the excitement. Have you been communicated plans for an evacuation flight?
Yes, we are being told that on Saturday there will be an evacuation flight. So we just came in. So, and then there is another set that will be coming in some few hours. So there is a plan for Saturday, we are being told.
Linus, talk to us about leaving where you were, getting to Budapest. What were some of the scenes that you saw and the things that you witnessed?
Wow, it was a long drive. I mean, from Sumy to Poltava, that is supposed to be 3-4 hours. We spent more than 4 hours because there was a very long convoy of over 70 big buses and cabs, and then to Lviv, and then to the border, and then now Budapest is being a 48-hour journey, over 48-hour journey. it was, or it is very, very stressful. But we're happy we're here and we feel safe now.
Well, not to dampen your joy, Linus, but we have had reports of, those disturbing pictures of Africans and people who have died while trying to get to the border, probably exhausted from fatigue of walking long hours and then the cold and all of that. Did you see any of those scenes as you approached the border and you crossed?
On our way, I didn't see that because they...
Okay, we seem to be losing signal with Linus. Understandably, he is in transit. So very happy, Linus, and the other Nigerians there with him.
And we're hoping that this can also get to those in Kherson.
Yeah, and talking about the disruptions caused by the war in Ukraine, many Ukrainians working at their country's Expo 2020 pavilion will not be returning home at the end of the World Fair in Dubai, as the disruption of war back home places their futures on hold. While many were already living in the United Arab Emirates, many of them, the 40-member team, were just in the country for the 6-month exhibition. Now they don't know what will happen to them when the event finishes at the end of March. Following Russia's invasion, many are unsure whether they can go home or how they will reunite with their families.
Now, Ivan Sidorenko, who directs the pavilion, was supposed to go back to his family in April, but the war upended his plans. But there are small sources of comfort at the pavilion, where attendees have covered a wall in colourful posts. It notes displaying messages of support and hope for Ukraine. When the expo ends, Moroz says he will go to Turkey. Beyond that, she doesn't know what next.
What scared me the most? Future of my country, and of course future of all my friends and relatives. For now, the most important for me, my relatives and friends that stay in Ukraine now. I'm worried about the humanitarian disaster, so like we used to live with the thoughts of war, but it's more difficult for us to realize that it can be a humanitarian disaster. So for now I'm worried about this.
For me personally, I haven't contacted my parents more than 1 week because near Kiev they have no internet connection, no electricity. I hope they are safe, they contact my relatives, and I hope within support of all our international partners, joint pressure to Russian Federation, economic sanction, diplomatic ways, we can bring peace to our country.
Не открывай, храни секрет, будь хорошей девочкой для всех, закрой все чувства на замок, навечно отпусти и забудь, что прошло уже не вернуть, отпусти и забудь, новый день он кажет путь. Не боюсь ничего уже.
Young girls singing in the pictures and entertaining people sheltering in a bomb shelter by singing the hit song Let It Go. Listeners, you know this, from the Disney film Frozen. And a video posted on social media, Amelia, she's aged 7, stood up in front of people packed into a shelter on February 27. She began to sing in her clear voice. The crowd fell quiet as some filmed the young performer.
The video was filmed at an undisclosed location in Ukraine by Marta Smekova, who was given permission to film by Amelia's mother, Lilia. Adina Menzel, who sang the song in the movie, tweeted on Monday, "We see you, we really, really see you," and followed her message with 2 hearts of blue and yellow, the colors of Ukraine's flag.
After she finished, there she is, to the applause, of course, of the listeners, the young girl looked around at the audience and giggled, holding her hands to her face, as we saw.
Закрой все чувства на замок, навечно отпусти и забудь, что прошло уже не вернуть. Отпусти и забудь, новый день он кажет путь. Не боюсь ничего уже, пусть бы шум ничто, холод всегда мне был по душе, а я иду все выше на ледяную пласть, и страха не вернувшись, меня уж не догнать. Пора узнать, что я могу, на помощь призову к себе во льдах навечно отпусти и забудь, что прошло уже не вернуть. Отпусти и забудь, новый день он кажет путь.
Браво, браво, умница!
Yeah, that's something to cheer about. I mean, war can be really, it can really dampen your spirits. And
Indeed.
Thankfully,
she's very innocent.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Thankfully, children have not lost their innocence despite the war.
And she's sending a big message. Let it go. And it's freezing.
Now, that message must be to the Russian President, Vladimir Putin. Well, thanks for watching, keeping us company this 1 hour. I'm Amarachi Ubani.
And I'm Millicent Walker. And good evening.